Hello, and welcome back to the Transformation of the Global System. I am Dr. Nicole Warmington Granston, and today we'll look at the issue of poverty and development. With that, we will examine global poverty, hunger, uneven economic development, and the relationship between globalization and inequality. We'll explore further the causes of poverty, food insecurity, development theories, globalization efforts, and international efforts to reduce poverty and hunger. Therefore, we'll emphasize that globalization creates both opportunities for development and serious inequalities and vulnerabilities. But first, what is poverty? Poverty refers to the inability to meet basic human needs, such as food, shelter, healthcare, education, and clean water. There are two main types of poverty. You have absolute poverty, where there's a lack of basic survival needs, and then you have relative poverty, that poverty is compared to others within society. So from this we know that poverty is both economic and social. Now, what about the other concept? What is hunger? Now, hunger is actually said to be defined as the chronic undernourishment caused by a lack of access to sufficient food. Hunger is not only caused by food shortages, but also inequality, conflict, poverty, and weak distribution systems. Now, there should be noted that there is a global distribution of poverty, meaning that there is some type of pattern. We've seen where poverty is concentrated mainly in areas or parts of Africa, South Asia, and some developing countries. Therefore, we see where global inequality means that wealth and resources are again unevenly distributed, and we're seeing the differences in this distribution between the global north, where there's more wealth and resources, and the global south, where there tends to be a lack of wealth and resources. Next, we define what is development. Now, development is simply the improvement of a country's economic and social conditions. More specifically, it refers to the improvements in ways of managing an area's natural and human resources in order to create wealth and improve people's lives. Like poverty, it is both quantitative and qualitative. And as such, we can see uneven development across the world, where uneven development means economic growth occurs unevenly across countries and regions. Some of the main causes of this are colonial history, unequal trade, dependency, global capitalism, weak institutions, and conflict. Now, there's said to be a link between globalization and poverty, that basically there are some positive arguments that how globalization can actually help to fight development. And of course, there's also negative discussions or consequences. So the positive argument looks at the idea of trying to develop a developmental model that can help. They argue that globalization can increase trade, attract investment, create jobs, and produce, or should I say, promote economic growth. And we saw that with the push for this orthodox development model after 1945. So with that, you're going to see industrialization is supposed to happen, technological transfer is supposed to occur, and we should see the development of international markets. On the negative side, right, we've seen that some of the results have not always been positive. You find where critiques argue that globalization may increase inequality, exploit labor, weaken local economies, and even deepen dependency. So we see that globalization has both negative consequences and even positive solutions for hunger and poverty. Now let's look at the different perspectives on development, hunger, and poverty. Now, the liberals would say that free markets and economic growth would reduce poverty. The main assumptions are that trade promotes prosperity, foreign investment helps development, and open markets encourage efficiency. Their key argument is that economic integration benefits developing countries over time. Then we have the realists that don't really focus much on development and poverty, but would acknowledge it if it challenges the power of developed states. Then we have the Marxist dependency perspective, where the main or core idea is that global capitalism creates and maintains underdevelopment. The main arguments include that wealthy countries exploit poorer countries, global trade favors the developed world, and poor countries become dependent on rich countries. As you know, the main thinkers of this school are Karl Marx and Immanuel Wallerstein. And we see again that this is the opposite of the liberal optimism that we get from the dependency school. If you want to be more specific and talk about Wallerstein's world systems theory, the main idea is that the world is divided into the core, periphery, and semi-periphery states. That core states are wealthy, industrialized, and dominant in trade and finance, while peripheral states depend on raw material exports and are more vulnerable to exploitation. So you get from this theory that global inequality is built into the world economic system. Now, what are said to be the causes of hunger? So the causes of hunger are as follows: that it includes poverty, people cannot afford food. The second being that of conflict and war, that violence disrupts farming, trade, and food distribution. The third is environmental problems such as drought, climate change, and national, or should I say, natural disasters. And the fourth being political instability, where weak governance affects global systems and aid distribution. Then, what is this other side of things where we talk about the idea of food security? We know that food security, that means that people have access to safe and nutritious food. The four dimensions of food security are availability, access, stability, and utilization. So we find that food security is about access, not only production. And with that comes a whole discussion about population growth. Where does population growth fit into the issues of hunger and even poverty? The main concern is that rapid population growth may increase pressure on food supplies, water, and resources. But on the other side, there's others that argue that the world produces enough food, but distribution is unequal. Now, who are said to be the major international organizations that help in dealing with issues related to international development or development? The key institutions are the United Nations, because they help to coordinate development and humanitarian efforts. There's a World Bank, where funds are that funds development projects and poverty reduction. There's the International Monetary Fund that provides financial assistance and economic reforms. And there's also the World Food Program that provides emergency food assistance. Now, some of the major critiques of these international institutions are that they may favor wealthy countries, they impose harmful economic reforms, they increase debt burdens, and they weaken social welfare programs. And this is where the Washington Consensus fall in, and how the structural adjustment programs were linked to this perspective. And we saw where structural adjustment programs often required countries to practice privatization, conduct spending cuts, deregulate, and even reduce government support. So as a result, we saw where some of the times, while the ideas or the perspective was seen as good, the outcomes actually happened in the negative direction, where we saw that these international organizations, the effect they had were very controversial in a lot of these developing countries. Now let's talk about sustainable development and the ideas as it relates to even hunger and poverty and what we can think about future generations. So if we were to define what we mean by sustainable development, it is basically development that meets present needs without harming future generations. The main goal was that of economic growth, social equality, and environmental protection. Then we also saw the role of the Millennium Development Goals as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the main purpose is that of reducing poverty, hunger, disease, and inequality. And we saw the transition from the MDGs in 2015 to the Sustainable Development Goals that expanded these efforts even more globally. And the key sustainable development themes were that of no poverty, zero hunger, good health, quality education, and climate action. So, with that comes the idea of humanitarian aid. And the purpose was to provide emergency assistance during famines, wars, and even disasters. Now, the types of aid that were provided were food aid, medical assistance, refugee support, and development aid. Now, some of the criticisms associated with aid are that it may lead to dependency, corruption, political influence, uneven distribution, and long-term reliance on donors. So you find that there's this discussion or debate about, does aid solve poverty or does it reinforce dependency? Another key concept, and looking at connected concepts, are that of poverty, conflict, and security. Now, it's said that poverty and insecurity are interconnected. Now, the effects are that poverty may contribute to instability, migration, conflict, and political extremism. So we look at how development issues can also eventually become global security concerns. There's also the link between climate change and hunger, where there's an important connection between environmental degradation that, as it worsens, is going to lead to food shortages, it's going to lead to other issues such as drought, displacement, and even agricultural decline. So we find that climate change increasingly affects global development. So, what are some of the key takeaways that I want that we look at when we finish today's topic? Is that poverty and hunger are linked to global inequality and uneven development. That two, globalization creates both opportunities and problems for development. And three, that different theories explain poverty and inequality differently. Key terms I'd like for you guys to remember are poverty, hunger, food security, uneven development, globalization, dependency, sustainable development, structural adjustment, humanitarian aid, sustainable development goals, and core and periphery. With that, I want to end with this particular point, that poverty and hunger are not simply local problems. They are global, political, and economic issues shaped by inequality, globalization, and uneven development. Thank you.